Welcome to the Atheist in Recovery podcast, where we talk about finding hope in recovery. And now your host, Dr. Adina Silvestri.
Hello, guys, and welcome to episode 81 of the Atheists in Recovery podcast. And today is a solo episode. I'm trying to sprinkle some of these episodes in at least once a month that talk about hypnotherapy because you guys seem to like them. So thanks again for the feedback. And before we get started on talking about 5 ways hypnotherapy can help you find unexpected meaning in recovery, I want to share a quote that I think really sums up this podcast episode. I've been doing this a lot with my men's group, and I'm not sure if they like it or not, but I think it's really fun. So they seem interested. If they are, I'm not exactly sure. But today's quote is, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Friedrich Nietzsche. And I really think that quote speaks to this episode for sure, because we're meaning-making individuals and we're constantly making meaning in our heads. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but especially when we are in a troubled place in our lives and figuring out ways to respond to these troubled events, we tend to have a lot of resilience when there's purpose in our life. And just like in recovery, our lives that are sober have to be so much better than the ones that we left behind, or else we'll find our way back. Yeah. So we have to find the essentials to increase our resilience. And I definitely feel like a deeper meaning is one of them. Okay. Let's go to the podcast. Let's go to the 5 ways that hypnotherapy can help you find unexpected meaning. So hypnotherapy, I want to just quickly state what it's not and what it is. For those of you that haven't listened to the prior episodes, hypnotherapy is not woo-woo stage hypnotism where at the end you're going to quack like a duck, or I don't know. Quack like a duck is what's coming to mind. Or do something that you would normally never do. Instead, clinical hypnotherapy is extremely physical relaxation coupled with an elevated state of mental awareness, and a lot of cool things can happen when you combine those 2 things together. So, number 1, take all things as granted. So take all things as granted, as gifts, not for granted, as entitlement. I think this is a good one because a lot of times I'll hear the people in my practice say, okay, I'm doing this gratitude list. It's great. It helps, but I could only keep writing the same things over and over again for so long. And so I've come up with a little bite that maybe can help us move to what we can appreciate. And it doesn't always have to be big things. It could be really small things. You don't have to come down with COVID to appreciate every breath that keeps you alive. So maybe we just focus on 3 capacities that we have: walking, touching your knees or toes, swallowing. And then you focus on those experiences of walking and touching your toes and swallowing 3 to 5 times a day. Focus on the awareness of the gratitude for being able to. Each day, add 3 additional capacities to focus on. Maybe the next day, it's a friend's voice. Maybe it's the smell of your mother's cooking or blinking your eyes. And when we do this with hypnotherapy, we're creating that intentional space to increase our awareness. And as you spend more time each day focusing your attention on the felt sense of these gifts, you're training your awareness and gratitude on your experiences in the present moment. Eventually, you come to realize that you are taking nothing for granted anymore at all, and everything is a gift. So that's number 1, taking all things as granted, as gifts, and not for granted, as entitlement. Number 2 is connection. So I put connection and then in parentheses with your past and future selves. And so I wish that hypnotherapy can transport us in time. Maybe, like a little time machine, like Back to the Future is sort of what I have envisioned in my mind. And in some ways, it can. It can't change things in our past, but it could certainly change how we respond and perceive things in our past. Every time we go into a memory, we're changing it just a little bit anyway. And so what I've been doing with, especially now during COVID, there's a lot of sense of loss of family, just grief, a lot of grief. And people are coming in and they want to talk about their family. They want to sort of bring some of that to light, unearth some of those relationships. And so I've had them bring in pictures of what these people, dead or alive, mean to them. It could be pictures of the person itself. It could be something symbolic. And then really just kind of take that symbol or take that picture and just hold it and be very curious about it. What are you feeling when you look at this? What's coming up for you? If you have to say something to the deceased, maybe that you wish you said, but you never did, well, hypnotherapy gives you that chance. And it's so much easier to do that when you're in a safe environment, when you're resourced, meaning you're calm when thinking about this triggering event. And, you're with a trained professional, and it really helps to guide you towards that healing process with the people that we cared about the most, for good or for bad. Just because someone in our family did us wrong doesn't mean we still don't love them in some capacity. Okay, 3, safety. This is a big one. So as you know, and I've talked about with guests before, that our nervous system responds almost too well to threats of danger. And we talk a little bit about that with Elizabeth Cush in episode 80, and I'll link to it below. So with this point, I want to highlight that we need to teach our central nervous system that it's okay in this moment. That whatever's coming up for us in this moment, difficult feelings that normally led us to a drink or a drug, these feelings and these thoughts are not always facts. And so when your central nervous system gets the signal, that's processed unconsciously, of course, that we are in a safe moment, it stays in equilibrium, even if there are real dangers in the outside environment. And so really being able to send the nervous system that signal that we are safe, it's so important. It's so important, and it takes practice to be able to do this. But I do believe that hypnotherapy and other meditation apps can really help widen the lens, widen how we perceive our environment and how activating we become. And so for this one, identify 3 of your own cues of safety in the present moment. So maybe it's petting your dog, hugging your child, cool sip of water on a sultry day, or a sip of warm tea. I'm a fan of black tea on a chilly day, curling up on the couch with a good book at the end of a long day. And maybe it's listening to your very own hypnotherapy script or your favorite meditation app. So number 3 is safety. 4, core values, another big one. So hypnotherapy helps you define meaning not in the form of prayer answering gods, although it can, if that's what you believe in, you can certainly use that in a script. Hypnotherapy helps your subconscious to answer the question, who is my spiritual connection, my higher power, my future self? And if you're not living according to the core values, hypnotherapy will highlight this like no other. And this is what I want to talk about, Jack. I had a hard time synthesizing Jack because I wanted to say so much, but in a solo episode, I try and make these short. So let me know if you want to know more about Jack. So let's talk about Jack. Jack would not define himself as an atheist at all, but he definitely believes in free will. He comes to see me for hypnotherapy because his marriage is falling apart. He's not the man he wants to be, and although he would never define himself as this, He is depressed. On the outside, everything looks great. He's a self-made man. He has beautiful things, a beautiful family. But his motivation at work is lacking and he is angry all the time. Jack comes to me for hypnotherapy, not necessarily for an addiction to substances. But what I tell him and what I believe is that the addiction is to his sense of productivity. He only feels good about himself when he's very productive, when he's having a very productive day. Maybe he's closing a big sale, whatever it is. So he's hiding his depression from self and others. And so in hypnotherapy, we uncovered many things. One being that he's holding on to events in his childhood that caused him to feel not good enough. You can relate to that. So with hypnotherapy, Jack was practicing it and his brainwaves were in theta, at that point where your subconscious is open to new programming and new ways of thinking. And so whenever Jack came into a stressful situation at home or at work, this is what would happen. He would try to reach for that new way of thinking. So practicing this daily was helping his awareness to become greater, for that lens to widen. So instead of those old ways of not feeling good enough, he chose to look through a different lens. He worked on it hard. This wasn't something that just happened overnight. And he started to look at a more nurturing, more kind, more loving narrative than the one he was so used to using. That script that I'm just not good enough, and all the examples that we could add to that script. He's choosing to not look at that anymore. And so Jack now is in a different place, is in a better place. He says, even if he does get divorced, even if this does happen, he's going to be able to handle it. He knows this. He's going to be able to handle it with much less activation and stress. And when I say activation, I mean the stress response than he would have before. Things aren't getting to him as much as they used to. He's definitely less angry. He's more happy. And this was just over a couple of months of work. So very, very quick. The last point I want to make for this episode is service. And you guys know this. If you're in 12-step meetings, if you're in AA, service is a big component. And I too believe in service. Right now it's hard. COVID-19 has dramatically changed how we interact with others. And for those of us who are newly sober, in-person meetings are not an option right now. But sharing and listening to other stories can have this amazing cocktail effect, amazing neurotransmitter cocktail effect. So they're released when we're able to express ourselves in the written form. They're released when we're sharing our stories, when we're listening to other stories. They allow us to go deeper when we're writing. They allow us to go deeper spiritually, emotionally, and cognitively. And for a better description of this, just head over to episode 64 with Valley Haggard, and she talks in depth about what writing does for our well-being. Okay, so that is the end of our solo episode, 5 Ways Hypnotherapy Can Help You Find Unexpected Meaning in Recovery. And if you're not happy, remember this, if you're not happy with yourself, if you're not happy with the way that life is going, make a plan to change it. It's scary, of course, but it all starts with a phone call. This takes daily attention and practice to feel better about yourself. This is not an overnight success. But if you're interested in learning more, I provide hypnotherapy to individuals in Virginia at my office and worldwide via Zoom. So please just contact me, and I'll leave links to all of these things in the show notes. And you can find the show notes at atheistinrecovery.com/episode 81. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Atheists in Recovery podcast. For more great info and to stay up to date, head over to atheistinrecovery.com.